Without any further delay, we have Mike already joined us. So Mike, can we, I have unmuted you. Yes, there, Mike. Yeah.
Yes, indeed. Hello.
Yes, Mike Salins. So friends, let's get started. And Mike has something amazing to show all of you, because I believe all of you are SQL folks. Mike works for Actifio, and I hope you can see the screen out there. And he is the principal product manager at Actifio. And there is something, you know, about these multi-terabyte database, as Mike calls them, as TB monsters. And there's a wonderful database management solution with Actifio, and he's going to show you probably a crisp demos how those databases can be restored in just few minutes. And that's what his session is all about: low RTO restores. And there's something very revolutionary and innovative about that. So Mike, without any further delay, over to you, please. The people are live on Zoom as well as on YouTube. Show, yes, rock on. The stage is all yours.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. So let me get the sharing turned on for my screen. And there we go. You guys hopefully can see my screen at this point then. And so hello, I'm actually joining you here today from Chicago, Illinois. So also from the US, except not by virtual background. I'm actually over here. So for me, it's nice in the morning. I understand you guys have had probably quite a long day. I know I'm towards the end of your day, so thanks for hanging in there. I know that from my days on the consumer side, that when I would go to one of these symposiums, that when it was time for the short vendor presentation, I would usually check out, go check my email, go get a bite to eat, go get some coffee or something. But I'm gonna plead with you and say this is just 15 minutes. Hang in there, because I think what I'm gonna show you today can really have an impact on how you handle your environment when it comes to recoveries, how you handle database recoveries, especially if you have any large databases, if you have any struggles with those large databases. So I am the principal product manager at Actifio for a number of different aspects of our product. But in particular, and relevant here, is I'm the product manager for all of our SQL Server integration. We deal with a great number of different databases and platforms, but SQL Server is one of my particular focal areas. In my past, prior to being a product manager, I've been everything that you can think of, from on your side, enterprise architect. I've been software developer. On the vendor side, I've been consultant, pre-sales, post-sales. So I've been in the industry for long enough to tip my finger in all the proverbial pools and understand how a lot of the pieces fit together, but more importantly, to understand some of the challenges that customers typically face in their environments. I'm gonna keep this really short and sweet. I've got 15 minutes, so I have very few slides, and I'm gonna jump right into the demonstration here, because I think that's really what's gonna wow you. So I'm just gonna tell you in a minute or two who is Actifio and what we do. I'm going to talk about database recovery types, what types exist and why and when you use them. And then I'm going to jump into that demo. And what I'm going to do within this 15 minutes, if you can believe it or not, is I'm going to show you a database recovery of a 5 terabyte database. I'm also going to show you how Actifio can do background data migrations, moving your SQL Server database from one storage to another storage while it's online and operating in a way that's completely revolutionary and different from anything that you've seen. This isn't a storage vMotion. This isn't a sleight of hand with a storage array. This is database level granularity migration of an online database. And I'll show you that and tell you why it matters. So starting out with, who is Actifio? Actifio, we've been around for about 11 years now, and we are the copy data pioneers. You've probably heard the term copy data before, but just defining it for you very simply, copy data is avoiding the need to make separate copies with separate tools for separate reasons of your data. Today, a lot of people, most people in fact, use a different product for backups and recoveries versus disaster recovery versus making copies for test and development or analytics or you name it. Any reason that you need to make a copy of a database, typically you have a separate tool, you have separate storage, separate people involved often. Copy data is consolidating all of that into a single platform, a single product that serves all of the needs. The concept of copy data is very simple. Make one copy of your source data and allow the user to use it for anything that they might need, whether it's a recovery or a test environment, as I said before, disaster recovery, using it in automation, to do something that you want to offload that burden from the production environment, anything that you can imagine. And as you can probably guess, that requires a great deal of flexibility with how you use the data. Today's focus is going to be really on recoveries of those large databases, and I'll sprinkle in little hints of other things that we do that are going to be relevant. And Actifio being operating since 2009, we've got 3,600 enterprise customers and service providers spread out across 38 countries in the world. So we're not just getting started here. We've got quite a bit of experience under our belts. Recoveries come in really a few different flavors. First is, why do you do recoveries of SQL Server databases? Well, the obvious reason, if I need to do a recovery, it's because I lost something. So lost data, I need to get it back. Usually that takes the shape of some data, not I lost the entire database. And in fact, I was speaking with one of my favorite DBA customers just the other day, and he said, you know, since I've been using your product, and he's been a customer for about 6 years now, I've never had to perform a restore of an entire database that became corrupted or needed to overwrite it. And this is a customer that has literally thousands of databases on hundreds of servers with petabytes of data that's highly transactional in nature. What he does, however, have to do regularly is get access to a backup copy of a database to retrieve some piece of information. And that is one of the strengths of what this platform can do, and I'll show you how. Other reasons to do recoveries, you need to do some testing, whether it's application testing, QA testing, maybe you need to do some investigation into a problem and you don't want to do it in the production environment. Maybe you even need to do some QA work and you want to do data masking on your data first to ensure your QA and development folks don't have access to sensitive production data like credit card numbers and social security numbers and health information. So this platform can also facilitate that data masking and then making the masked data available to those who need it. And then of course, sometimes, rarely, but important when it does happen, sometimes you do have that full database recovery requirement. My database is down, it's been corrupted, maybe the storage had an issue, maybe the cluster, as failover clusters often do, cause more damage than good in my historical experiences. Maybe that's taken you down and caused an issue, and you truly need to do a restore. But those are your reasons for doing recoveries. But what I've seen is the 99% rule is you typically don't do a restore in place. You restore somewhere else, retrieve the data that you need. So that's what I'm going to show you here today. So jumping into a demonstration, I have got the interface open right here for what we call Actifio Global Manager. It's a centralized management tool, very much like a VMware vCenter that manages a bunch of ESX servers and farms and clusters. This can manage a farm of Actifio appliances that can be geographically distributed or local for horizontal scaling. I have made it very simple, where I have some filters applied, and these filters are showing me just managed databases on a single SQL server. And I'm going to pick this big database. When I go to, say, Access, it's going to show me all the different point-in-time images that I have available that I've captured from this database. This is effectively showing me my backups. So the backups can be stored in different places. We call this often the Guitar Hero view or the ramp view, because I can see what we call as in a snapshot pool. We can see in dedupe, offsite dedupe, remote snapshot, and even something we call on vault, which is putting data into object storage. That can be in Azure Blob, for example, or in Amazon S3. So I'm going to just leave it straightforward. Say, you know what? I've got the most recent backup selected. I have a range here that shows I have transaction logs. I can do point-in-time roll forward. I just have to say, if I need to recover this database, I need to get into that backup and retrieve some data. I need to look at a table or query to find out what's going on. All I have to do is say, what server would I like to access this on? So I'm going to type demo SQL 9. Demo SQL 9 is a SQL server. Here it is. I'm logged onto it. And you can see I've got almost nothing on it. I've got a very small database. It's out here on my S drive. Other than that, I have a C drive. And in total, I have 500, I have about 600, a little over 600 gigabytes of storage on this server. The database, however, that I'm going to recover, this is a 5 terabyte database. And I'll show it to you as it comes back. all I have to say is where I like it. I can select if I want with my logs a point in time to roll forward to from my available range. I can give it a new name, so I'll call it Big DB, which is actually my source database name. And I'll tell it where I want it to go in this case. I'm going to put it on the M drive. And I say submit. So that will kick off this process. And this database recovery, it's going to take about 3 minutes to run. So if you can imagine 3 minutes to get access to a 5 terabyte SQL Server database on a server that doesn't even have enough storage to handle it. So clearly I'm not doing a traditional restore. I'm going to be using a little bit of storage magic, and that's going to bring this database onto my target server. Now, what happens when I run this is kind of an interesting thing, because the Actifio appliance is going to, in the background, I'll hit the system monitor here so that I can watch the job as it runs. It's going to go to my backup, and it's going to say, this backup, which by the way is stored in its original native format. So what Actifio has is a copy of the MDF and the LDF and the NDF files, not a .back file embedded in some proprietary format. It has a disk and it has those files on it. And so what it's going to do is it's going to take a snapshot of that disk. It's going to present that snapshot via the storage layer over to my, in this case, my ESX farm, which is running my SQL Server. It's going to map that data into my VM. So if I come and watch, it'll take a couple of minutes, but I'll see an actual disk device show up on my SQL Server here. And that disk device is going to have on it all of my data. I'm also going to see another disk device that will show up, and that's going to have my transaction logs on it. When I watch in SQL Server, then I'll see my database show up. If I catch it quickly enough, I'll see it in restoring mode, and then it'll get brought online, and I'll be able to run queries. I'll be able to show you where that database is located. It'll be located on a new drive, which is the M drive. That's why I specified it. So we'll be able to see it show up in my list here. Now, one of the questions that I often get is, how do you get backups of these really large databases? It's great, Mike, that you can do this fast restore. I can bring a database online. It'll take, by the way, this is going to take about 3.5 minutes. Bring that database online and query it and do anything I need with it. But what about backing it up? And the compelling thing, or one of the really different things about Actifio, is we do everything as efficiently as possible. That includes the backups. So SQL Server doesn't have a concept of an incremental backup. It just has full differentials and transaction logs. We've actually invented incremental backups for SQL Server in a way that allows us to do incremental forever backups. So those very large databases, the days of having dedicated windows over the weekend and trying to do a full database backups over the weekend, or trying to beef up your infrastructure to handle full database backups every single day, they're gone. Because with Actifio, there's only one full backup, and after that, it's incremental forever. I was not quick enough to see it. I can see, look, now I have a big DB database over here. I saw my 2 disks show up. One of them disappeared. That was the one now that had the transaction logs, because we're done with it. It showed up, we brought the database into SQL Server, we rolled the logs forward, and then we dropped that disk. So now I just have an M drive, and I can see this M drive is 8.5 terabytes. I also see my big DB, and if I come and I say, let's take a look at the properties of this database, I can see this database here is over 5 terabytes in size, right? 5.1 terabytes. I can take a look at the files and say, where is it located? Well, naturally, it's on the M drive, because that's the drive that I just added. That's the only place that has enough space for this 5 terabyte database. And I can browse it. I can go into, say a table and select some data. And, in a couple of seconds, I have my data showing up from, and of course, first query is always slow because SQL Server is doing its caching and getting everything running. But now I have full access to my database. I can do anything with it that I want. So if I needed to do some investigation, find some missing data, I can do that. If I needed to actually run production from this database because the production database was down, I can do that. Now, as much as this is a nice, fast way to get access to the data, and it does cover your 99% rule, I just need to get access to retrieve some data. What this that I've just showed you isn't. It isn't really a restore. I would use the word recovery, but restore means I'm putting the data back somewhere. So rather than take time and say, I'm going to copy this database to this server, which doesn't have enough space anyway, I've got a small database over here. And if I show you the small database, you can see its size here. It's 6 gig, so not very big at all. I can see where it's located. It is located on the S drive. So what Actifio allows, and this small database, by the way, this is running from a mount from Actifio, just like the big database is. If I come to my Actifio interface, I can go to this screen called Active Mounts, and it shows me what's available, what's there. And I can see here's the small database that I created. Here's the big one that I did. On the small one, if I have something running from an Actifio mount and I want to actually restore it, I can just come and say migrate, and it'll say, okay, how often do you want to refresh the migrated copy? Because what it's going to do is copy the data in the background from the running database onto my server, one full, and then incrementally refresh it on a schedule. And I can say do that every hour to refresh it, or once a day, or anywhere in between. I don't have to specify copy thread count. If I want to make it faster, I put a higher number, slower is a lower number. Of course, higher means less time, but more I/O. I can choose where I want to copy it to. In this case, I'm going to redirect it to something called C:\migrated, because if I look on my SQL Server, I have here C:\migrated as an empty directory on my C drive. So all I have to do now is say submit and OK, and this will initiate the migration. So the migration is going to, and I can watch it as it happens over here, it's going to basically do a backup in the reverse direction, where it's going to say, okay, I've got my database here, let's back it up onto this local disk. And then after it does it the first time, it's incrementally refreshing it. At some point, I need to actually do a cutover. And this whole process takes about 2 minutes, maybe 3 minutes for the full copy, that initial full copy to take place. But once it's done the first time, I'll go back in and you have to do something called a finalize. And I'll show it to you. And finalize is basically saying, I now want to tell SQL Server to run from my local copy instead of from the copy presented by Actifio. And so to do that, the finalize process will actually take the database offline, do a final synchronization, and then bring it online running from your server's disks. Now that final synchronization, of course, is very quick. It takes a few seconds because really no data has changed, or very little data has changed since the last refresh, and it's doing it incrementally. So it doesn't take very long to happen. The question then that often comes up, especially in today's age of SQL availability groups, and if I was in a room filled with people, I would say at this point, how many of you are using SQL availability groups? And about 50 to 70% of the hands go up. And then I say, who's looking to use them? And the rest of the hands go up. What we do with SQL availability groups is we will allow you to do this in parallel on all of the nodes in the availability group. So you can do that mount to all of the nodes and take a database and bring it into your availability group. And it's instantly synchronized because you've recovered it to the same point in time on all the nodes and then brought it online. And then you can do this migrate on each node to copy the data from the Actifio disk to the disk for that server. And then you do the finalize, and on the secondaries only. So on the secondary, you say, hey, I want to finalize. We will finalize the database by taking it out of the availability group, refreshing the data incrementally, and then bringing it back into the availability group and letting it resync. So here you can see I've got an MDF file. It's not done copying. When it's done, I'll see the LDF file show up, and then I'll go in and I'll do that finalize and show you that. So there's a question out there while I'm waiting for this to finish and copy the LDF that says the M drive, is that a new drive created on the fly? The answer is yes. That's exactly what happened when I did that mount. I told it what drive I wanted. If I didn't tell it, it would have picked one. I can use mounts points or drive letters, and it will create that drive on the fly. The drive already has the data on it. So for example, if I browse here to my M drive, I can drill in and I can show you, here's that big database and all of its files. So I'll jump back into my migrated to see if that's done. Not quite yet. I can also take a peek over on my job monitor, and I should see the migration job running. It says 4%, but it's not accurately reporting. It's actually going to be much more than that. Jump back over to SQL Server. There's another question. These days, it's always about cloud and all. Can we also do a copy and restore a 5 terabyte database to a cloud, Azure managed instance or Azure VM and SQL Server database? That's a great question. The Actifio appliances that we use, they can run in the cloud as instances on any of the main clouds. They can also run, of course, on-prem in VMs. And then we also have a hardware version for large on-prem type infrastructure databases. We absolutely can do all of the same actions with SQL Server running in the cloud versus on-prem, not with the managed service, but with the self-managed, if you have an instance running SQL Server for that. And the reason for that is we do require an agent to be able to manipulate SQL Server to do the additions and the log roll forwards and the incremental backups, for example. And we can't get that agent into the Azure managed database platform, but we can into a self-managed. So if you have your own SQL Server, yes, we absolutely will support that. Another question, will the drive remain on the server after the restore or disappear after a certain period of time? It will remain until you tell it you're done. So if I come back in, and I'm going to jump back because I think my migrate is done and I want to wrap this up. I know I'm 2 minutes over here. That's not quite done yet. But when I go to my list of active mounts, for example, say I'm done with my big database that I mounted up here, what I can do is I can come and I can say unmount and delete. And when I do that, I'll go ahead and do it, it will then take my database offline, remove it from SQL Server, and then remove that drive letter because it's no longer needed. It's all happening on the fly right through this single interface here. When I go to my small DB, once I have a single migration job completed, the finalize option here will show up. So I'm assuming that that will be not much longer here. It only ran for 2.5 minutes when I did my dry run yesterday, so I'm a little surprised it's taking a little longer now. Let me jump back over to my job monitor and I'll look at the next question. It's always about cloud and all. Do copy file. Oh, so I answered, sorry, I'll say answer live, answer that question, answer that question. All right, that's all for the questions right now. It looks like my migrate job for some reason is, there we go, now it's finished. So let me initiate that finalize and then we will be finished. So if I come back over and I'll go to my small database, you can see now I have finalized migration and I just say proceed. And we can watch this as it happens. We have to watch quickly because it happens pretty quickly. What I'll do is I will move my directory up. It's this act small DB is a temporary holding place. It will move the SQL data up a level when it does this. So if I come over and I watch, the finalized job is going to kick off. For one of the first things I'll see here is I'll see that the small DB will disappear, or it'll go offline. Sorry, not disappear. It'll go offline, and then I'll see it come back online about 30 seconds later. Looks like I've got another question. Will that DB be read-only? If not, what will happen to the new data? Great question. The databases that we mount are not read-only. You can use them. You can leave them there for minutes, hours, days, weeks, months, and they are read-write. When I said that we are taking that backup and taking a snapshot of it and then presenting that snapshot to the server, that snapshot is a read-write snapshot. And so the storage that's been allocated to the Actifio appliance to hold those backups will use some of that storage for the changes you make into that mounted database, keeping it separate, of course, from the original backup, because backups have to be immutable. You can never modify them. You wouldn't want to. So that is a good question. They are absolutely read-write. So taking a look here, looks like we're about done. I'll hit refresh. I can see my SQL data has moved. If I come and I say, look at my properties of my small database, and I go to files, I can see it is now running from my C drive under migrated. And now I have the disk device, by the way, that had been running, that S drive, that's gone now too. No longer needed once the data is running on your local drive. So we cleaned it up as part of that. That concludes everything for my demo. Got a couple quick questions. Does it only work with full backup or transaction logs too? We absolutely use the transaction logs. When I did the mount, I had that slider that I showed to pick the point in time. That uses the transaction logs. You pick the point in time all the way up to the most recent transaction log, so you can leverage those logs and get the most recent data that you've got. And finally, a restore option of SQL Server termed as migrate DB from Actifio tool and copy to the desired location of the server or make somebody on the same drive. Yeah, yes, that's exactly, this is asking the question. Using Actifio, is the restore option in SQL termed as migrate DB? It's not an option in SQL Server, right? You don't have the migrate option in SQL Studio. You see it in the Actifio screen, and it's just called migrate. Thank you guys for the questions, and we'll appreciate it.
Thanks,
One last
Mike.
question about uncommitted transactions. We leverage VSS when we capture the data, so it will take anything that's committed and disregard anything that's uncommitted there. All right,
Thanks, Mike. Thank you so
very
much. And I'll tell you, Mike, you were awesome. I mean, amazing. And yeah, it was a little over, but that great demo and great concept. And I think we all SQL professionals need something like this. I mean, monster TB, you have just restored in a few minutes. So audience, community, as I promised in the morning, you see that we had two knowledge partners today. One was C Data and the other one, C Data Software and Actifio. Very meaningful presentations, very meaningful demos, and that's why we call them as knowledge partners, not really sponsors, because they bring knowledge on the floor. Everything they talk about and every demo that they do is very relevant to our projects, our problems, the solutions that they give, very relevant to your job roles. So thank you very much, Mike. And please, that's why, friends, take a moment to click on that link on in the chat window, dataplatformgeeks.com, connect with KP. So just put down your name and email ID if you want these knowledge partners to connect with you, talk to you, give a more personalized demo, understand the problems that you are facing. And if they have a relevant solution, click on that link and they will talk to you. So it's just a form with two fields, name and email ID, and that's just good enough.